Okay, glad to have you all here. And we are going to be continuing on with our series based on the theme pandemic, post-pandemic world. And we've already covered, just to backtrack a minute, we did the general sort of picture at the first lecture. The second one was on Starlink, the global internet, which I think is very important at the moment. And thirdly, we did Tesla. And in the same spirit, we're going to be talking about SpaceX and the reusable rockets. They are a game changer, these reusable rockets, because as you remember, NASA has been the only one that has been putting out rockets, and of course, Russia and the other countries. But NASA has been the main player, and they have been building, even the moon rocket, for instance, was built by them. So they were the only ones, and their fortunes fluctuated with the governments that were in at that time, over a period of time, the Democrats and the Republicans. So the funding of NASA was not very even, and the objectives also changed. So NASA thought maybe a good idea to try and bring in the private money in, private enterprises, and that's what led to the creation of the SpaceX by Elon Musk. Now, we've been talking about Elon Musk. We'll go a little bit more into detail when I show you a bit more. But his vision is one of having to make the Earth into an interplanetary um, beings, so that we are not just bound to Earth. So that's a big vision he has. And the way that he's going to be accomplishing that, he believes, is through rockets that he has now developed, which are reusable. Now, that really is something quite sort of marvelous and objective to have, because we have in the past seen the rockets cost a heck of a lot to put up payload in space or in orbit. And that has meant that they couldn't do a lot because it was such an expensive business. NASA, I think, has spent over 150 billion in all sorts of research and rocketry to date. So when Elon Musk came in about 10 years ago, he sort of came up with this idea that he wants to reuse the rocket in order to bring down the cost, because each launch was running into hundreds of millions of dollars, which is not really affordable for most countries, or for that matter, most research-oriented entities. So the reusable idea was experimented with, and we'll go into a bit more detail later on as to how that became really possible. In order for him to be able to sort of fund that development that he's doing, he managed to get a contract or two from NASA to develop the rockets in order to try and deliver supplies to the International Space Station. Now, you may remember that the ISS is a joint collaboration with the Russians and all the other countries that are there, except for the Chinese, I think. They were excluded from it. So what has happened is that when NASA stopped their Apollo projects after those disasters that they had, they didn't have any means of getting to the space station. So what happened in this situation was that they had to get Russia to carry out the supplies to the ISS, and also carry US astronauts to the space station. And of course, the Russians weren't going to do it for free. They charged them quite a bit, and that's also running into tens of billions of dollars. So it was a very expensive proposition on the whole. So when Elon Musk came along with this idea that the reusable rockets were the way to go, it became, I think, of great interest to NASA. So they gave the projects to him, enabled him to develop some of the early work that he's continuing still to do. One other thought that he also mentioned, sorry, did anybody say anything? Okay. One other thought that I thought I might mention in passing is that in order to fund the space program, the rocket development, it wasn't sufficient to get the money from NASA. So he's now going to extend this, the remit of the rockets in order not just to supply the space station, but to go to the moon and to the Mars as well. So to be able to then reach those far off destinations, he needs to have more money. And one of the ways that he's going to be accomplishing that is to try and make Tesla, which is owned quite a lot by him, and which is successful as an automotive company, which we talked about last week. So he's hoping to get the profits from that and put it into the space development program that he's got. And of course, the same thing goes for the Starlink. This project that he thinks the global internet is going to yield him a fair amount of money, and that money will also go towards funding the space programs. So those are the rather big sort of objectives that he's got. And we'll see now, for instance, in a bit more detail of what you get in the presentation. Okay. Yeah, now that's the guy. Not only has he got this other project, but he's got another thing called Solar City. We'll talk about that some other day. Now, he and his partner, they managed to make the money, as I told you last time, developing this PayPal. And with his own money, he put the money into buy Tesla and all the other things that he's putting. So in a way, he's not out there to make big bucks. But rather, he's trying to sort of make enough money to be able to further his projects that he has in mind. So just again, for background for those who haven't been with us for the previous lectures, South African born, became Canadian, became a business engineer investor. Got an immense vision. He's now mostly a co-founder with Tesla and all the other companies. I'll show you a list of other companies soon. He's also quite important in the way that he has gone about trying to achieve his goals. So I think he has a lot of people who feel good about him, but there are those people who are a little bit nervous about his statements and so on. So you have to see what is behind those nervous statements of those people, especially those people who are shorting Tesla stock in the stock market, you know. So that's anyway, worth quite a bit, not as much as the others, but fair bit. Now, these are some projects that he's engaged in. Now, in SpaceX, he's got essentially all the launches and the communication using the Starlinks and so on and satellite. So there's that element to the SpaceX project. And then Tesla, he's got all these automobiles and trucks and batteries all sort of being pursued in terms of research and being put into these cars. We've got another company called Boring Company. I'll talk about that at some future day. This is to make tunnels from here to, say, Birmingham, and you can just put your car on skates and off you go there at 500 miles an hour. So that's an interesting idea as well. And then, of course, he's very much into open AI and Neuralink. This has to do with basically robotics and all that as well. So he's got lots of projects in the pipeline. We'll cover them as we go along. Not today.
Shafiq, can I just say something? Everybody, if people move, I can hear it. Can everybody mute their just whilst we're listening to you speak?
I can mute everybody, yeah.
It would be great, because then we then you keep cutting out, because if somebody moves, unfortunately.
Oh, I see. All right. Let me.
I'll mute myself anyway.
Okay. Let me just see. I've lost that. Okay. Stop sharing there for a moment to get back to my participants, and then I can mute all there. Okay. I've muted all. Okay, except Maureen and Giselle. I think, George, you've cut out your video as well. So mute all, unmute all. If I unmute, yeah. And then unmute again. Okay, current and new participant will be muted. Okay. So yeah, okay, I've muted everybody. All right. So now let's continue with our sharing of the screen. I think we was showing it. There we are. Okay. Little background about SpaceX. Now, the space exploration doing business, they're a private company, American company. They're not on the stock market as yet, but Google has got about 7 to 10% share in it, and some other venture capitalists have also put their money in. Sooner or later, it'll come out on the stock market, and that's probably a good stock to buy for the future. Yeah, it was formed in 2002 with the goal of reducing space transportation costs. That's where the reusable costs come in. And of course, to try and colonize Mars, a lofty project there. Now, in order to sort of get to that point of really making those vehicles deliver the vision, he has developed a series of rockets called Falcon rockets, and we'll talk about a bit more about that. And these, at the moment, have evolved into other ones called Starships as well. We'll talk about it a bit later as well. Okay, now this is the rocket family, Falcon. Now, the first flight was done in 2008, good sort of 10, 12 years ago. And they are now at level 9, which I will show you some clips of making them reusable. And the reason why we can make them reusable is to retrieve the booster rockets rather than have them just disappear and sort of get destroyed. They get reused. So we'll see a bit of that. Okay, now how is this thing coming about in order to make the rocket reusable? Now, this is the type of rocket we can think of. Just keep that. These are the boosters here, and the main booster here, and the payload area here. Now, as we are able to sort of show in this first stage here is this one. Second stage, of course, is there. And now, so here we have number 1, liftoff. This is schematically trying to sort of prepare you to show the clip later on that I will, which shows how it actually happens. So when it lifts off, it sort of has these boosters flying off, and as they separate, because the boosters, after they spend most of their fuel, there's no point in being carried, so they separate and get destroyed normally. But this time, you can see these boosters, they sort of spin around and then try and sort of they flip over before descent. They start to descend. And as they descend, they'll come down here and sit back on the ground or wherever they were designed to come back and land. While these separate boosters are retrieved, the main sort of booster takes the payload right up along this path here, and then of course comes back and lands here. See, so that's also retrieved. So you've got all these 3 being retrieved, and then the payload in this red line carries on to orbit. And in this particular case, in fact, he put a Tesla car into orbit around the Mars, which is still headed that way. It's quite a little flight. It's gone. So here it is. These two rockets, they come and land in these two pads here, near the place of takeoff in this case. And this other booster, the last one, lands on the sea on a sort of a big platform, which can be placed anywhere because it's motorized and so on. So you can see wherever there is a design that needs a landing of that, the raft goes there and waits for it. So here we are. And then of course the payload, oops, the payload is here, right on top. See this red line that puts the payload is here in this top, at the top here. And this car is sitting there. You can see the relative dimensions here. And this car then is spinning off into space at the moment. So that essentially is the schematic of how the retrieval takes place of the booster rockets, which then means saving on enormous amount of costs. And that's why he is able to sort of change, it's a game changer for the space program. So next one here, I'll see. Now this is just a picture of one of these Falcons in 2015 taking off. It's not, you can skip that, it's just a little picture. He has also developed a way of making supplies to the International Space Station, the ISS. And this is an arm which sort of uses on the space station to attach itself to the main ISS and have supplies given. Now, I'll show you a clip of the YouTube, I think I have. I'll just stop this particular share and go to the other share that I want to do, which is a clip. Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you. Great.
Okay, this is the Falcon Heavy. It's getting onto the launch pad.
Most space organizations, government, or
and you hear the sound as well?
Too low. They've really gotten built relatively small rockets. And Falcon Heavy is the first time that there's something that's arguably even in the super heavy class, or somewhere between heavy and super heavy. 5 million pounds of thrust is really crazy amount of power. More than twice as much payload as any other rocket. It can launch things direct to Pluto. No stop needed.
Hotels in the area are completely sold out. Parking lots are packed.
It's like the first time something exciting has happened in rocket launch in a very long time.
Falcon Heavy is configured for flight.
T-minus 15, stand by for terminal count.
Spacex Falcon Heavy, go for launch.
10, 9,
All systems go. Bring self booster mission.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Space on our test flight. Building on the history of Saturn V Apollo, returning to a 39-year interplanetary mission. Import the call-out. Vehicle is supersonic.
Self boosters, vehicle.
This is the car that we put into orbit, which is going towards Mars.
towards Earth when they're about to begin their landing burns.
And the landing burn has started.
Unexpected landing signals have started. Salvation landing legs have deployed.
I see it. Yeah, got him. They're there. Oh my God, damn! You gotta be kidding me! What?
Well, there you are. I think that's one of the things that I wanted you to see, because it was really the first time that something was recovered and we are able to see it actually land. And that is the basis on which the whole program of reusable rocket is centered on. So I'll unmute all so that you can just say what it is. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go back to the presentation in a second. But in the meantime, do you have any questions so far?
Well, that was pretty impressive. I must say, pretty impressive. Can I just ask? I mean, is he going into any? Is it embarking on any international partnerships or collaboration on this, or is he just doing this SpaceX solely? I mean, it's his own thing, but is he collaborating with anyone else this to try and scale it or not?
Well, at the moment, it's like a private company whose shareholders, about 10% of it is owned by Google. But
all right, okay.
percent of it is owned by Elon Musk himself, and little other sort of portions are by some other venture capitalists. So in terms of the collaboration, he's got a type of thing where he invites everybody to come and join in various types of research. Okay, I'm going to be finishing in 10 minutes, but I'm going to recall you all again so that we can continue, all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shafiq,
Okay.
can I just ask, did the third thing come down, the main
Yes,
central
that also came down, yes.
on the
I'll
card?
show you that all three of them
Right.
are reusable now, and they have been reused to put up satellites as well. So that's why the cost of putting up a satellite is so much lower and very easily affordable, with the Starlink having to be up there, thousands of them, being able to sort of be in orbit and provide the global internet as well. So the cost is very important element of that whole, that's it, right? Okay. I'm going to share the screen, which is our, okay, so you're able to see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This rocket, just going back a little bit again on the nature of these rockets, it's the most powerful vehicle flying today. And it can carry 100 tons, which is quite a phenomenon in terms of payload. So let's move on from there. Okay, this is the picture of the booster coming back and landing. This is the third one. The two side ones came because it was close enough to land, but this is somewhere out in the oceans. And they knew where it was coming, so they positioned a raft type of thing there, and it came and sat on it. You can see, incredible. Just letting highlight come in. I think we're all there now, I think. Yeah. Okay. Put that away. Okay, this again is the clip showing all three coming back and landing. But since we've seen that already, we'll just move on from that. Now, this Falcon family of rockets has a further older brother, older sister, if you like, which is going to be the even bigger. And it's already under experimentation and could be the one that eventually will be taking off for the moon and to Mars. So we have a tremendous amount of capacity in this Starship. I'll show you, these are the pictures. Here you'll see a picture of, this is the one that goes up. This is the booster, which can be retrieved as well. And this has a huge amount of payload capacity. Another picture. So it's like science fiction. I used to read comics about space travel when I was young. And these are very similar to the type of pictures that were there in my comic books. So it's quite astonishing that we have the vision coming true before long. There we are, another picture. Able to see all of you? Can you see these pictures?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, what are the economics? Let's just have a quick. For the people who are already working with SpaceX, this is SpaceX in the second row here. And this Blue Origin, this is Bezos' company. This is NASA. And this another company, and this Boeing. And these are the types of areas that they're all engaged in. Launch vehicles, SpaceX, we're just talking about their rockets. And Bezos has his own rocket. I'll show you pictures of that. NASA, of course, got their own rockets, which they're not working too much on, but they're still. And then, of course, Boeing also has that. Then spacecraft, that is the one that you put the payload in and let it go around in orbit or wherever with the people in it. Spacecraft. So that is also being done by SpaceX and Blue Origin. These habitats, these are, once you get to the planets, what you do over there, which SpaceX, I think, will be engaging in that as well. And there you have NASA engaged in all these activities, Boeing somewhat more, and the others, the private ones, a bit less. But nevertheless, I think they're coming in very fast. Now, if you look at the cost of transport, you can take a Boeing 737, it costs $100 million. And just imagine if you just did it for one ride, that would be very expensive. Nobody would be able to afford the tickets. But because we're able to use it, multiple times, the cost of running it and servicing it, I think, is very affordable. This is a cruise ship here. That's quite expensive and therefore reusable. And that's the concept that we are also going to be seeing in our post-pandemic world coming to fruition, where the rockets themselves become reusable. Now, why is SpaceX also moving ahead further and faster than others is because they have a policy of being vertically integrated to a large extent. They control a lot of their own manufacturing and design. So here in this case, 80% of that rocket is within their own sort of control, and they're able to do all sorts of things with it. The current cost is $1,100 per pound. Now, if you're talking about 100 tons, it's quite a bit. So nevertheless, they want to bring it down to $500 per pound of solar. When I say 100 tons, that includes all the other bits and pieces there. Now, this is again a picture of that coming into the sea and landing on that raft. Stage 2, it sort of separated at speeds of 18,000 kilometers an hour, and it was 225 kilometers high when it separated, and then came back down here. Now, going into a little bit more technical sort of side of it, it's got 27 engines, and this thrust, I mean, it's enormous. That's why I say.
I can't talk very loudly. So, no, that's fine.
Can you mute us, do you think?
Sorry?
Once again.
Could you mute us?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, all of you have been muted. All right. Let me. Okay, the cost at the moment is still a bit high, $90 million, but it's coming down. And that's where the emphasis on research is going on. And the retrieving of these boosters is going to cut it substantially. So the competition is here. Again, I told you about these companies, Boeing, and this is a group of companies, United Launch Alliance, and there's Lockheed as well. And that the other company is, of course, the Blue Origin, that's Bezos. And China is also engaged in this. Their budget is, limited to some extent. India is also into it, half the budget, but they seem to be doing some very good things with it. They've also managed to retrieve some of their boosters, according to what I heard. Now, this is a guy who is quite rich, got $155 billion, and he can spend up to $3 billion just for himself. And you saw the Chinese government is spending $3 billion, and he himself has spent $3 billion. So in a way, he's got lots of money. It's a question of really whether he's got enough of a drive to be able to want to get to Mars or wherever, which I think he may have, we don't know, but he's still lagging behind Elon Musk, because Elon Musk is really driven by that vision. Now, Bezos' rocket is this here. It's called Blue Origin. And he hasn't done very much except to sort of raise it up to a certain height and then bring it back and land. So this thing can take payloads up to certain heights and come back and land. So there is that retrievable ability there. Well, here the economics is $300 million if you get that reusability. And this is again the picture of these people coming back, these boosters, which we saw in that video clip. So here is a beautiful picture. I mean, when everybody saw this the first time, they were amazed to see the come and land. vertically like that. Okay, that's again going back to trying to reduce the cost, which they will bring it down as they work on different types of fuels and their holdings. So, oh, I'm going back to things. Seems to me, I think okay. Yeah, okay, this is where we were talking about the SpaceX, Blue Origin, Bezos, and India. These are fairly sort of well developed, coming closer to SpaceX than others. Now, this is a picture of your rockets, the sizes. They come in all sorts of sizes. Here is that Starship type of configuration. This one can separate from this booster here. Booster gets saved, and this one can continue. Yeah, and then it continues and then comes back and lands. That's why it's got these fins. See? Now this is Bezos' thing, Blue Origin. It's a little bit odd. And there's the ISRO, which is the Indian one. Yeah, again, showing that coming back and landing. So far, I think they've had more than 60 launches, of which they've had 30 times the boosters have been retrieved. Now that figure has gone up to 50. There's a payload here. These are the various Falcons. This Falcon 9, which is the one that has done early work on putting payloads and satellites, in fact. Now this Heavy is the one which is even more able to carry heavy loads, and that's the one that put the car into orbit that is headed towards Mars. Okay, this is the idea of having to make us into a multi-planetary species. That's one of the visions. Okay, I think we've got essentially time for a few questions. I'll stop the sharing and we can, in fact, make that screen larger. And I'll unmute you all now. Okay, now, anybody got any questions?
Yeah, Shafiq, it's quite incredible, as you say. It's almost back to the science fiction that we used to read as kids. I mean, absolutely. I mean, the cost coming down, and like everything, there's, it can come down very rapidly, but it's still incredibly high. At what point is it sort of expected to become a commercially viable project? Either with, payloads for cargo, and I guess the next question is, when does it become even remotely commercially viable, if ever, for people?
Yeah, well, that's the target for Virgin Branson. They want to go into space tourism type of thing, going around the orbit and take some people's and give them a view from there. Blue Origin also is going after some, this tourism. But in terms of the actual commercialization of this rocket, it's not too far away, because what they're talking about is, of course, we haven't seen in practice as yet. Once you've reduced the cost of a launch and the payload it can also manage is quite substantial, they can sort of send from one part of the world a rocket right to the other part of the world within, a short time, hours. So it becomes a commercially viable proposition, because the payloads are available and the cost of launch is also much reduced. That 90 million I showed you has been reduced quite substantially. When I talked to you about the Starlink, you remember that 60 satellites were put up into orbit for a cost of very little. I think it was, each launch was just very small figure in terms of hundreds of thousands, because the things were retrieved and it was just the cost of fuel, which was in fact the one that you had to pay for. And of course, with that big payload that they could carry, oops, what's happened here? Are you there?
Yeah.
If something happened, I was doing something which, okay. All right, we're back here. So this the cost of fuel and the payload, which has increased enormously. The cost of fuel is the only one. So the cost of rocket is gone. So they retrieve the engine and so on. So it becomes a commercially viable proposition in not too long in the future. Yeah, Maureen, you've got a question?
Yeah, just about the car. So the Tesla car is still on the way to Mars.
Yeah.
Hasn't got there. So it must have been incredibly difficult to know when to open the payload doors and set it on its way. I mean, did it swing around the Earth first and then go off?
Yeah, normally what they do is with these orbits, they circle the Earth a couple of times, and then they go as a slingshot,
Yeah.
And sort of goes off on a tangent and then continues in that trajectory until it comes there to Mars.
So they can't control it. There's got no rockets on there to control the direction or anything.
No rockets there.
Mm.
So you remember we talked about the satellite, the Starlink satellites. They have independent little, so they can position themselves in such a manner that they don't collide with each other.
Oh yeah.
These are these special types of small engines.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Mushtaq.
Yeah, I just thought this launch was in 2018.
Yeah.
2 years ago. Are there any? What are the prospects for future? What's the timetable?
Yeah, the big sort of projects are that we might be seeing by next year. I think one of the figures that I saw is that they're going to be putting in the Starship into orbit and put some heavier payloads in orbit as well, because they're talking about maybe even putting in 400 satellites per launch, because their numbers have got to grow up, not only 12,000, but I think further numbers are increasing to 40,000 satellites. So they need to sort of do that with lots of launches, and that is the immediate sort of goal. But the work on the Starships is coming along very fine. I think in the next few days, we might even see. There was some little testing, I think in a couple of days back, again, testing out some of the basic behavior of these Starships. But if you are looking for when we might be able to go to the moon or when we might be able to go to Mars, that is still, I think, a few years away, at least to Mars. The moon, I think, can be accomplished if they have, some sort of NASA plan to go there and put up a little base or whatever. Because SpaceX doesn't want to do this by themselves in terms of this. If somebody has a job that they can utilize the cheap rocket launches, then other countries are there. I think countries like Bangladesh and all these other countries, they wanted some satellites to be put up by SpaceX because it was so easily affordable. And they have their own satellites to sort of monitor their requirements. So that element of revenue is there for SpaceX at the moment, a global commercial prospect of putting up satellites and so on. Yeah. All right.
So can I just ask one other thing? Do we know, is anybody planning to make some sort of settlement on the moon? Is there any plans to go there for anything? I mean, probably not.
The countries that are desperately trying to get something out there, one of course is, there was China. They sent a robot, a flight right up to the other side of the moon, the dark side, and got a land there. And they are able to do that. None of the other countries have been able to go to the other side of the moon. So China has done that. India has also sent a rocket, but I think it crashed. And also Israel sent a rocket, and also it crashed there in the moon. So what I think are the immediate needs and is that this capability they're going to have to be able to position themselves either for commercial reasons or for their own national interests. Like I think somebody was saying, I think even Trump mentioned that he wants to start mining the moon or whatever resources that moon has. So we'll see. There is a fair amount of work being done, but nobody has as yet put out a camp out there, a base so far. But it's before long, I think they will.
Can I just ask? I have read that there's dangers of if there's a settlement on Mars, dangers of radiation. I don't know how high that is.
Yeah.
Is there also dangers if there's a settlement on the moon? I mean, I don't know how much radiation a human being can take safely.
Well, I saw that sort of information as well not long ago, where some of these people are making statements that Mars is going to be full of radiation with no atmosphere or whatever protection. People will just roast if they get there. But the correct view is essentially to try and look at and see some of the maps that NASA has come up with about radiation of Mars. And there are some very, hot spots there, a few, but not everywhere. So there is a small atmosphere as well, which gives protection. And the amount of radiation that Mars gets is the same amount of radiation that the International Space Station gets. And if one is, in the space station for the past few years, they have survived with the protections, of course, and therefore it is not the disaster scenario that some people are posting as being a very dangerous proposition.
Shafiq, I have read that there's quite a fair amount of radiation in the space station. That's what was worrying me as well.
I saw the figure that there was quoted by about 20 to 30 REMs. That's the measure of radiation. And the one in Mars, they think from these charts that they have worked out is about 33. So it is a little bit more, but at the same time, quite manageable, in my view. Yeah, Maureen.
I think the other thing that's dangerous about not being on the planet Earth is the cosmic rays, the solar wind. And we're protected by the magnetic field. And Mars had a magnetic field, apparently, some millions and billions of years ago, but it's gone away for some reason. So the magnetic field not being there won't deflect cosmic rays. So that can damage your DNA and your bone marrow. It's people who fly planes, even they have more exposure being at a higher altitude than people on the surface of the planet. So they'd have to figure out some way of protecting themselves.
Yeah, I've seen the colonization plans on Mars. They've got these home-like constructions where you stay and you connect, go from one to another, so that you're not exposing yourself to the atmosphere within this sheltered area. And I think that shelter will probably protect you from cosmic rays as well.
Yeah, I think they're going to do some exploration about tunnels and caves, I read somewhere.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Especially if this boring company of Elon Musk gets going,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to be
Make holes.
very well colonize Mars with this boring company.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Pamela? Oh,
It's amazing, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I thought.
Well, I think this doesn't get too much coverage unless one is interested in, you see, that subject.
No.
Therefore, a lot of things are happening in technology, and I think we need to be conversant with that. And that's one of the reasons why I do these lectures, because you know there are so many problems in the world being faced by human beings, short term and long term, and the answer is technology to a large extent. At least that's the first step. Second step is the proper utilization of this technology by the politicians. And that's where I think a lot of failings come about. Yeah? Right.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So how are we doing?
Very well.
Good.
Fantastic. It was excellent.
It was very good. Very, very good. Yeah.
Interesting.
Very informative. Thank you.
Very informative. Yes,
Thank
very
you.
informative.
Really.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
thank
nice
you,
to
Shafi.
hear
I
about
loved
something
it.
else
And we'll
apart from coronavirus.
Yes, we're here.
Yes.
You just mentioned it, Pam.
Oh dear.
What's that?
The virus. Nobody ever mentioned it.
The dreaded word C.
Yeah. If you listen to some of these science fiction type of ideas, it's not only this type of organic virus that one should be afraid of. There are these other electronic type of viruses that can be, you know, created and sent out into space.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So have to be a bit watchful and have checks and balances to make sure that the data that we give is protected and all that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Goodbye. And
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was fantastic.
Very interesting.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, Shafiq.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.